All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. I am Andrew for America, and today, it's a busy time of year out there, people. I got a lot going on in my life, and I'm actually going to talk about some of the stuff I'm going through right now in a future podcast. But forget about that. Lots going on in Ukraine and the Soviet Union. It's 24/7 in your face on the media. And my good friend Sam Winchester from the According2Sam Podcast has been doing a series of probably, I think your last 4 shows were on the topic of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they are absolutely fantastic and informative. And if you have not listened to his show, you should go check it out immediately. But I listened to Sam's last 4 or 5 episodes, and I have so many questions, and he's done a lot of great research on this topic. And so I invited him on the show today. And we're just going to kind of riff on this whole Ukraine, NATO, Atlanticism, old Russia conflict that is reemerging here in modern day 21st century America and the world. So Sam, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, buddy. Thank you for having me.
Like I said, your shows have been awesome. And the first thing I wanted to bring up today, I think it was in your very last episode, when you brought up, I forget what year it is. I kind of want you to go over it for my listeners, but Lindsey Graham and John McCain going over to Ukraine and apparently having a conversation before Trump took office with the Ukrainians, trying to cajole them into an offensive conflict with Russia. Did this really happen? Is this real life?
We have video of it. It absolutely happened. And let's not forget Amy Klobuchar, because Amy Klobuchar was also there with John McCain and Lindsey Graham, speaking to the new president, Petro Poroshenko, and his army, encouraging them to take the fight to Russia, but not take the fight to Russia, to take the fight to the Russian-speaking people in the Donbass as a proxy war against Russia. And yes, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Amy Klobuchar were there, but we only have the video of John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Amy Klobuchar, but we also know that other representatives from the United States, Joe Biden, the CIA director under Barack Obama, John Brennan, and other members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, were going to Ukraine, encouraging the Ukrainians to antagonize the Russians and to take the war to the Russian-speaking people in Donbass. And they were doing this, ironically, at the same time Germany and France were in peace talks with Russia and the representatives from the separatist regions in Donbass. They were in Minsk, Belarus, working out the Minsk agreements and trying to negotiate peace in this region. And at the same time that Russia, Germany, France, Ukraine, and representatives from Donbass were trying to negotiate a ceasefire and peace, you have American representatives going to Ukraine and working against those peace deals, telling the Ukrainians, we're going to arm you, we're going to send you all the weapons you need to go to the Donbass and antagonize the Russians through the Russian-speaking people in Donbass that had basically declared their independence from Ukraine in 2014 after the coup.
That is absolutely bananas to me, that if that can be proven and there are representatives in government, maybe even namely Trump and the Trump camp, if there's a chance that that was true, and I know you're saying it is, and I'm just saying I have a little cognitive dissonance going on. I find it very hard to believe, because if Trump knew that and was aware of that, how are these people not arrested and facing jail time right now?
So that's the biggest thing, and that I don't understand why Trump is not coming out. And the video that we have of these senators in Ukraine speaking through
Amy
an
Klobuchar, dude.
Amy
She's from
Klobuchar.
Minnesota. Oh my
I
God.
was just going to say, I think she's your
Gross.
senator.
Oh man.
But the video of them speaking to Poroshenko's army through a interpreter, it went viral just a few weeks ago. I've known about this video for a few years now, but it went viral, and I don't understand. Trump has said a lot about this conflict in the past couple of weeks, but I don't understand why he's not more upset of the fact that this is December of 2016. He's the president-elect, and he doesn't get the opportunity to come in and do his own foreign policy with Russia. Because we remember, and I talked about this 3 podcasts ago, the Russian reset that Obama did in 2009. When he comes in, his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, meets in Geneva with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign representative from Russia. And Hillary Clinton has this little fake plastic button. We want to reset our relationship. Yeah. So that was Obama. Yeah, but listen. So
like these are what world leaders are doing. Oh, hey, let's press the button together.
Let's press the button, and that's on. We have that on video, and so the Russian reset. And I don't have any problem with them doing the Russian reset. I believe that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, peace talks. If you're talking about peace and you mean it. Yeah.
That was the point of my last podcast, to de-escalate tensions. Mature people would in a world where we have nuclear weapons and the potential for a nuclear conflict, mature people would try to de-escalate tensions. That's what Germany was doing and France was doing with the Minsk agreements and negotiating peace. They were trying to de-escalate and that was the right thing to do, the Russian reset in 2009 to de-escalate tensions with Russia. And that was Obama's prerogative as president of the United States to do that Russian reset and that foreign policy decision. What I'm saying is that when Trump came in and was sworn in January of 2020, he did not have the ability to do the same foreign policy that Obama did in 2009. He was not given the leeway to have a Russian reset, to rearrange our relationship around Russia, because Russia had been so demonized because they lied and said Russia had invaded Crimea, and that was the first major thing, that we have to sanction Russia because of their invasion of Crimea, which I've laid out in my show that Russia did not invade Crimea. They brought their military out of the 5 bases that they have in Crimea, and they brought in some other troops there to protect the people of Crimea. And the people of Crimea, they wanted the Russians there. They voted to be annexed by Russia for their own protection.
So they weren't necessarily invaded. Quote,
they were not invaded,
as opposed to what the mainstream American media
over and over again. You'll hear it. Over and over again, you'll hear that Russia invaded Crimea. They did not invade Crimea. There was a violent coup d'etat in Kiev where the legitimately elected president was overthrown in a violent coup where 2,500 people were injured, over 100 people were killed in that coup d'etat. Russia, they came out of their bases in Crimea to protect the people of Crimea at the behest of the Crimean people, who asked Russia to protect us from these neo-Nazi groups that were basically wreaking havoc all over the country. Because the coup d'etat had taken place and there was this new government who we put in place. We know this from the Victoria Nuland phone call with the ambassador, that we put we put these guys in power, these neo-Nazis in power. And so
where's the progressive left?
Where are they? They're so
where's your outrage on this one, lefty?
They're so easily manipulated.
Everybody is. Even some of the stuff I've been hearing on right-wing media lately has been questionable too.
It's bipartisan. That's the thing that I wanted to point out the fact that it is bipartisan, that Lindsey Graham and John McCain are Republicans, but Amy Klobuchar is a Democrat.
So
You know,
that just it's so shocking to me that that occurred. Like that blew my mind when I heard that clip you played. Like just the slimy, just manipulation they're trying to run on these people was just gross to listen to.
Andrew,
And
I cannot believe that they recorded that and
wow.
that video. I mean, like, so the phone call that we have with Victoria Nuland and the ambassador, that was a leaked phone call, a bugged phone call. But I don't know I don't know who put this video out. And like they're proud of the fact that they're going over. And then I like the fact that Lindsey Graham says, we'll go back to the United States and push the message.
That's pretty telling.
What does that mean?
And here we are.
We're going to go push the propaganda. So the first thing that Russia did to really start it to allow themselves to be demonized by the West in the world community was the accusation that they annexed Crimea.
Oh yeah, that was
and then the next really big thing that Russia was accused of that kind of added to this isolation and more sanctions was the 2016 election, where Russia is framed and lied and said that Russia interfered in the 2016 election. And that's the only reason that Donald Trump was elected is because of Russian interference. So we've got to further demonize Russia. Right. We have more reasons to sanction them now after Crimea. Now they've interfered with our election.
Sounds like dialectical thinking right there.
It's a very, very, what they did when you look at it mapped out. And that's why I'm trying to do this on my podcast is, I mean, I go from the cozy relationship from the Russian reset in 2009 to Obama telling Mitt Romney the 1980s called and they want their foreign policy back, to Obama with the hot mic with
more flexibility.
Yeah, I have more flexibility after my election. So in 2012, there was a cozy relationship, not a relationship of enmity between the United States government and Russia. And what happened in the summer of 2013 to change that relationship. And I point out that was Syria and the conflict in Syria.
Speaking of that, so you've kind of brought up a couple things that I noticed. And I want to, I'm sure you clearly already know this, but I just want to point it out because, correct me if I'm wrong, let me get this right. Based on your research and some of the stuff that I've read and looked at, during Obama's administration, chronologically speaking, do you believe there is or is not a chance that the Obama administration was simultaneously funding Al-Qaeda, ISIS, neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and the Free Syrian Army?
Absolutely. So the Free Syrian Army. So the Free Syrian Army had comprised, in the Free Syrian Army, you had Sunni separatists from Syria that made up the rebel force that is fighting against Assad, who is Alawite and Shia Muslim. So this conflict between Sunni and Shia Muslims goes back to the 7th century. They've been fighting each other. So the conflict in Yemen has to do with Sunni and Shia Muslims. In Iraq, Sunni and Shia Muslims. In Syria, it was Sunni Muslims fighting against the Alawites, who are Shia. So the Free Syrian Army was made up of Sunni. So let me explain this to you. So we went into Iraq.
Jesus.
In Iraq, the ruling party under Saddam Hussein was the Ba'ath Party, which were Sunni. The majority of the people in Iraq, though, are Shia Muslims. So the minority, the minority Sunni, the Ba'ath Party, were controlling the majority in Iraq. We go in, we topple the Saddam Hussein regime, and we have the elections, and the Shia come to power, and the Shia, they start basically disenfranchising the Sunni who had ruled over them within the Ba'ath Party. The insurgency happens. Then after the 2006 election, George Bush loses. Then what's the term that they use where he got a schlacking? That was the term. He got a schlacking. And that's when Nancy Pelosi first becomes Speaker of the House in 2007. Republicans lose all of Congress. And at that time in 2007, when the new Congress comes to power and George Bush loses in the congressional elections in 2006, he blames his defense secretary for all of the troubles that are going on in Iraq. All the Americans died. So Donald Rumsfeld basically resigns, and George Bush brings on his father's CIA director. Bob Gates was George W. Bush's father, George H.W. Bush's CIA director, Bob Gates, who actually ran Iran-Contra, Bob Gates. So he comes in as the new defense secretary, and the new policy is surge in Iraq. So they send more troops to Iraq under General David Petraeus. So when we send more troops to Iraq, the Sunni are overwhelmed in Iraq. And a lot of those Sunni rebels that we were fighting in Iraq, they flee into Syria. They go into Syria and they join the FSA. Okay, so you already have these Sunni Muslims that are fighting Assad in Syria, and then you have these Sunni Muslims that are disenfranchised moving from Iraq into Syria, and then you have members of Al-Nusra Front, which were declared a terrorist group by the United States, joining the FSA. And then you have Al-Qaeda coming and joining the FSA. So it's all of these Sunni Muslims that are joining the FSA, but a lot of these groups have, the one thing that they have in common is they're Sunni and they're fighting against the Shia, but they have some variance in their ideologies. And Obama in 2013, he decides that he is going to send weapons and fund the Free Syrian Army. But at the same time that he's sending weapons to the Free Syrian Army, he's also sending weapons to these Sunni separatist groups that have moved out of Iraq, these Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra.
So he's basically creating his own demand. It is the Hegelian dialectic. It's like controlling the conflict. We need to have an enemy. And out of this conflict, we're going to sell a bunch of propaganda and we're going to achieve a bunch of goals that weren't publicized. And the story that you're getting, it's like on my show, I talk about the show and the reality. What you see on your screen is the show, but what's really going on in real life, that's the reality.
Yeah, it's the reality. And the funny thing about it is that, okay, so while you're there in 2013, and you make these accusations, everybody's calling you, oh, that's conspiracy. It's a conspiracy theorist. But now we are 8 years removed and it's a fact. I mean, it's established. You wouldn't call me a conspiracy theorist now if I say if I say Obama basically funded the rebels that would become ISIS. It's a fact of the matter now. But when back in 2013, they were saying that it was a conspiracy theory, and Obama actually absolutely, ISIS started in Syria. It started with people who we funded from the FSA. That's how ISIS started. And then once ISIS was this big army in Syria, we all remember the pictures of the caravans of Toyota trucks coming back into Iraq. They take over Mosul, they take over Iraq. So the answer to your question, yes, it took me a long time to lay it out, but absolutely at the same time that the Obama administration was sending weapons and funding what would become ISIS in Syria, he was also sending weapons and funding the Nazis, the Azov Battalion, and these other Nazi groups in Ukraine.
That's great. That reminds me of Dave Smith has this line on the intro of his podcast. It says, if you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now.
Exactly. Now that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it's I mean, you can't take that away from him. He got that right. Let me ask you this. So I wanted to read this to you. So I have some interesting thoughts on this Zelensky guy, and this is coming from a place of absolutely no education or research. From what I've seen from him on TV and hearing the stories about him being an actor, and it feels very wag the dog to me with this guy. And it feels very like this is the scapegoat. This is, that controlled conflict theory again.
Andrew, the terms that Russia has laid out for him to accept and end the bloodshed in this country are extremely reasonable. They're basically just recognizing the status quo. He's already said that they're not going to join NATO. So, I mean, put that aside. So the points of contention are really for Zelensky are recognizing the independence of the Donbas region and Crimea, which, I mean, these regions have been independent for 8 years now, almost a decade, and Crimea has been annexed by Russia. I mean, so just recognizing this, but the thing is they had the opportunity to recognize I mean, not even the independence. They in the Minsk agreements, they agreed that Donbass would not be part of Russia. They would remain part of Ukraine, but they would govern themselves as an independent region. They agreed to that in Minsk too. So, I mean, for Zelensky just to codify that in the Constitution and make it legitimate now, he could end this, I mean, immediately. Why is he not doing that? And why is the Biden administration continuing to send them weapons so they can get their people killed and continuing to escalate the conflict? Why is Joe Biden not using his influence to tell Zelensky, hey, make peace, accept these very reasonable terms? And that's a question that every American needs to ask themselves, especially when you consider that we have video of senators going over to Ukraine and encouraging them to go on offense and to escalate. Is the Biden administration right now doing that? Is the Biden administration encouraging them to keep up the fight? And if that's the case, it's very irresponsible.
Well, I mean, just that story, that going back to Trump being president-elect and Lindsey Graham and Klobuchar, them going over there, just the storyline and the chronology from there until where we are right now. How is that not the story on every mainstream media news show? How is that not the lead story about how these people went over and negotiated foreign policy before Trump even took office? It seems like a shady move from, you know what I mean? It seems like a treasonous, court-martial level move, and Andrew, it's not the main story.
It's a huge scandal. I don't get it. This is such a huge scandal. Lindsey, so in 2016, so let's go. So in 2008, John McCain ran for president. John McCain ran for president. He was rejected by the electorate. Nobody wanted John McCain's foreign policy. Amy Klobuchar and Lindsey Graham both ran for president in 2016. They were both rejected. Nobody wanted their foreign policy. Right. People voted for Donald Trump, and they wanted Donald Trump's foreign policy, and Donald Trump was not allowed to do his foreign policy because Donald Trump, as soon as he gets into office, he's forced to take this antagonizing stance towards Russia because they're accusing him of being a Russian. They're accusing him of only
ridiculous.
It's crazy. The Russiagate narrative, I mean, it started immediately after Donald Trump is sworn in. I mean, a few weeks after that, they're accusing his national security advisor, Michael Flynn. They're accusing his attorney general, Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions, he was a senator and then he becomes the attorney general, and they accuse him of meeting with Russians as a senator. So the point I'm making is that as soon as Trump comes in, he doesn't get the opportunity to have the same Russian reset and to reset the relationship that the same thing that Obama did in 2009. He doesn't get to make his own foreign policy because he's being forced by the intelligence community and the media to take a hard stance with Russia, because if he does anything in the way of trying to make peace with Russia, then we're going to accuse you. That's more evidence that you're with the Russians. And they had already started the special counsel accusing this guy of being a Russian. He did not have the ability to make peace. He had to keep up the antagonizing stance towards Russia, because if he did anything to make peace, they were going to accuse him of being in cahoots with Putin. The exact thing they're doing right now. They're doing that right now, accusing him of being in cahoots.
I mean, these are the methods of empire, right? Like,
Sure.
This is how it goes when you're playing in the big club. I think I said it once. It's like literally Game of Thrones and House of Cards. Like, that's really like, you're never safe when you're, in these groups of people that are trying to control and manipulate and take over. And I mean, it's just crazy. Here, let me read this. I want to read this to you real quick. This is a tweet by Matt Walsh. And he said, Zelensky is trying to drag us into a world war that will result in thousands of our sons and daughters dying horrible deaths. And yet so many of you fawn over him. You won't even think critically about what he's actually asking for and what it would mean for us. It's pathetic. Your thoughts?
So I get that. And I mean, Zelensky, I had somebody tell me that he's like the new Michael Avenatti. And you remember when Michael Avenatti came out, that everybody was saying, you could be the next president, you can run for president. And now he
got some airtime.
Yeah, so he's been convicted of, robbing his client, Stormy Daniels, and basically stealing a bunch of money. He's totally been defamed. But at the time when he's going against Trump as the lawyer for Stormy Daniels, he was on every TV show. He was, the media darling, and now he's totally been defamed. And I kind of see the same thing in Zelensky. He's the media darling right now, and who knows where that's going to go. But I don't blame Zelensky so much for his expectations, Andrew, because I think that the people like John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Amy Klobuchar, Joe Biden, Victoria Nuland, John Brennan, the American representatives who went over there, I think that they set these expectations for Zelensky. I think that they made Zelensky and the Ukrainian people believe that we would defend them militarily if they continue to antagonize Russia at our behest. We're going over there. We're telling them we're going to keep sending you weapons. We're going to continue to make sure you have everything you need to go and antagonize the Russians in the Donbass. And I think that in doing that, that the Ukrainians actually believe that the United States has our back. And if Russia ever acts on us antagonizing them at the behest of the United States, that the United States will have our back and will come in and defend us, and militarily, not just send us weapons to get our people killed, that they will come in and they will actually fight for us. And that's not going to happen. And people are calling for it. It's just a proxy. And that's the thing. We're using them. And I can't, honestly, I've heard some things from Zelensky that show that he's disheartened in what the reality is, because he believed there would be more of a intervention from the West in the United States than what we're doing. And all we're doing is sending them more weapons. And as I explained in my last podcast, we can continue sending them as many weapons as we want, and just continue escalating this. you're going to be getting a lot of people killed. You're going to be getting Russian. They're going to kill some Russians. A lot of Ukrainians are going to be killed in this proxy war. But
Sometimes I wonder if that's always part of the plan, just a little bit. Oh, more people are going to die. Oh, darn. It's like, I don't know.
I don't know it. I mean, but the only real weapon that the West has in all of this is the propaganda and to get as many Americans.
Powerful weapon.
It's a huge weapon to get as many Americans as they can to buy the propaganda. And it seems to be working really well. I'm doing my
Despite
best.
our best efforts.
I'm doing my best, Andrew.
So am I, man.
I'm doing my best to add the context that the media.
I talk about this little. Sorry, I talk about this a little bit on my. It just came out today. Democracy in America.
Mhm.
I talk about how just lazy, apathetic, like. We got to wake up, people. Like we continue to fall for this shit time and time and time and time again, and it's just it makes me just.
And they're basically to push the propaganda. They have to make you malleable, where they can shape your opinions. Yep. And the way that they do that is through your emotions. And you can see the reports, how they're just tugging on people's heartstrings, and just showing pictures of civilians that have been displaced, civilians that have been hurt by this. And of course, people feel bad for these people that they're seeing. And if you have a heart, you should have an emotional response to it. But to not have any context to that emotional response, that's how you're being manipulated. If you're just starting to count casualties and people that have been hurt in this war 3-4 weeks ago when Russia invaded Ukraine, that's not honest. This war has been going on for 8 years. 14,000 people have been killed in Donbass with our weapons that we've been supplied. What about those people? Where was your emotion and your heartfelt sympathy for people that are suffering? See, and that's the thing. I mean, Americans don't really even know about the Russian speaking people of Ukraine and what they've suffered over the last 8 years. Now, the one example is this damming of this river of fresh water to Crimea, that immediately after Russia annexed Crimea, there is a river that streams down to Crimea from the Ukrainian mainland. And just out of spite, the Nazis that had taken over in Ukraine dammed this river so the people in Crimea can't get fresh water. What kind of people do that? Those are the people that you're supporting, the people that are not allowing fresh water to get to the people that need it. And
it's one of those unfortunate aspects of human nature, like I always talk about. We will never act perfectly. We will make mistake after mistake after mistake for eternity.
So that's the thing so most of these people that are in support, rah, and there's a lot on the right, but I think that there's a lot of more skepticism on the right than on the left. I just really think that the left has eaten this all up because they bought Russiagate and the fact that Russia made Donald Trump president. So they were able for over, the last 8 years to really demonize Putin in the eyes of the left. Even like Julian Assange, when Julian Assange was first blowing the whistle on George Bush and his war crimes in Iraq, the left loved Julian Assange. They loved him. But as soon as Julian Assange put out the DNC and Hillary Clinton's emails, then, we don't, Julian Assange is our enemy now, because so that's the way they think.
So obvious.
So the left has really eaten up the propaganda, and they are the ones who are really some of them are really pushing for the no-fly zone and for us to have boots on the ground and really have an increased involvement in what's going on in Ukraine. And the funny thing about that is that we have been told over and over again about how white supremacy in the United States are the biggest problem, and these people, these white supremacist Republicans, that they fear a pluralistic society of different ethnicities and different cultures, that they only want a white culture, and they just want a homogenized society of white people. That's all they want. And then you look at what's really going on in Ukraine. The Russian speaking people are an ethnic minority in Ukraine. The white nationalist Nazis that are basically in charge in Ukraine after the coup d'etat, they don't want a pluralistic society. They don't want to respect the rights of the ethnic minority who are the Russian speaking people. They want a homogenized society of white Ukrainian people. And the people that are supporting that are the liberal left. Do you not see the hypocrisy in that?
It's like, it really, all of this stuff makes me think like everything is the opposite. So everything you're being told, chances are the opposite is what's true. So with the media is demonizing Putin, right? And I was going to bring this up earlier because I'm kind of getting this vibe when you kind of pull back the veil a little bit and you start to learn about the history and you do the research, the extensive research like you've done, you come to this conclusion almost where for a moment I was thinking to myself, you know, NATO and Atlanticism was originally intended to be in direct conflict with the Soviet Union, with Russia.
Absolutely.
And now that this is all coming back, and you know, people are asking, can you blame Putin for looking at this troop buildup and this propaganda campaign against what's going on in these countries that border, you know, all the way up his border basically in Eastern Europe with Western Europe? And it's like, is Putin actually a hero? I know that's controversial, but is he actually fighting the good fight? Is he fighting the quote unquote globalists that are trying to get a foothold in Ukraine? In a previous podcast, I brought up Nathaniel Rothschild allegedly commenting on how important Ukraine was to the big club's big plan. What do you think about that?
So when NATO absolutely was created as a block of nations to combat the Soviet Union. But after NATO was created, the Soviet Union created their own pact with Eastern nations, and that was called the Warsaw Pact.
Right.
And so you had two different pacts. You had NATO and you had the Warsaw Pact. Germany in the 1990s was the real point of contention, because you remember we had the Berlin Wall, and Germany was split in half after World War II. Russia and the Soviet Union had the eastern part of Germany, and the West had the western part of Germany, and it was separated by the wall. Reagan goes over there, Gorbachev tear down this wall. The wall is torn down, and Germany is basically one nation again. Still not part of Russia, still not part of the still not part of the Warsaw Pact or NATO, basically not united to either one of these pacts. In the 1990s, Germany and NATO, they want to bring Germany in to NATO, and Russia is negotiating and saying, you know, well, we want to bring them into the Warsaw Pact. And there are some Germans who wanted to join the Warsaw Pact and have more of an allegiance with Russia. And there were Germans that wanted to be part of NATO. George Bush and his administration, and this is in all of their minutes and notes as they're negotiating, they make an agreement with Russia that if Russia dissolves the Warsaw Pact, which is no more today because they dissolved it, that if they dissolve the Warsaw Pact and allow Germany to be part of NATO, that no other Western countries would join, or Eastern countries that were bordering Russia at that time would join NATO. and the United States went back on that agreement and accepted another dozen or so nations that border Russia after
I
that
heard
deal
that
was
14
made.
more have been added or something.
14 more were added after they told Russia that if they dissolved the Warsaw Pact, that they wouldn't expand NATO further east, and they actually did. But the thing that we asked about Putin being a hero, and is Putin a hero? If you look at,
I'm not saying I agree. I mean that.
well,
Interesting.
let me tell you my point of view on this, and how it relates to what's going on in Ukraine right now, because the Minsk agreements that were negotiated with Germany, France, Ukraine, Russia, and the separatists from Donbass, I mean, there's really nothing in those agreements about NATO that is a huge point of contention for Russia. The majority of the issues that are negotiated in Minsk have to do with recognizing the independence and stopping the war in the Donbass, of a ceasefire. Putin's not even saying that NATO is the big issue for him. The big issue for him is protecting these Russian-speaking minority in Donbass, that the Azov battalion are using American weapons to basically commit ethnic cleansing. So, like I said in my podcast, that these people, they voted to declare their independence after the coup d'etat in 2014. And why wouldn't they? And why wouldn't they? Because
that's why I focused on that part on Ukraine episode, is I wanted to hammer that home, that these people were courageous citizens who wanted independence. What does that sound like to you? They were trying to create a republic.
Exactly. I
what
read
does that sound like to you? Sounds a lot like America.
Like I did it in the podcast before the last. I even read the Declaration of Independence, and it says whenever a government comes, so it says life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that these are unalienable rights. And whenever a government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the right of the people to separate from that government and establish a new government. So let me ask you a question. Is banning your native language a destructive to your ability to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? Because that's the very first thing that Arseniy Yatsenyuk did when we put them in power. They passed legislation to ban the Russian language, and it was
basically fighting words. You're basically saying, all right, well, fight us, or that's your only alternative. Like,
yeah, I mean, you try to ban my language, the language that I communicate in. That's my culture. That's everything, So these people, the people in Crimea that voted to be annexed by Russia, and the people in Donbass that voted to be independent after the violent coup d'etat in Kiev, they didn't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I want to be independent and I want to be part of Russia. No, this violent Nazi government that we put in power in Kiev, the very first thing they did is they passed legislation to outlaw their language. After the violent coup.
Like movie stuff. It's like reality. Like, it's the best movie I've ever seen.
After the violent coup, they not only just staged the violent coup, but after staging the violent coup, they passed legislation to outlaw the native language of the ethnic minority in their country. What do you expect these people to do? So seriously, going back to Putin. Putin is protecting the ethnic minority in Ukraine. And people ask, who do I stand for? I stand for the ethnic minority in Ukraine. Yeah. I stand for the people.
Like it's a moral act.
He's absolutely right. I don't stand for Putin and Russia and what they're doing. I stand for the ethnic minority in Ukraine, the people of Crimea, the people of Donbass, and Putin stands, and he's actually fighting for those people. So by happenstance, me and Putin are on the same side, because I support that ethnic minority and Putin's supporting that ethnic minority. So, I mean, by happenstance, we're on the same side.
Interesting. It's, and I wonder, so again, I'm trying, man. I'm trying to get off the progressive left. I really am. But in this very specific situation, where are you at?
Where are
Where
you?
are you? You brought up a word earlier, hypocrites. Everything that my government and media tells me is so laden in hypocrisy and manipulation that it just boggles my mind that there are still adults amongst us in this country that are just literally plugged in, walking around, no concept of anything that's going on around them. And that's why the propaganda tool is so effective, because you're being manipulated when you don't even know it. It's like, how do you know what's happening to you if you're not aware of it? And it's just terrifying that there are a few of us who can see it, and we can scream it from the rooftops. We can do 1,000 episodes of podcasts. And what kind of dent are we really making? And that's no excuse to give up. I'm going to keep pushing. I mean,
For sure.
like you said, it gives us purpose. This is what I feel like is part of a purpose of my life. I'm going to scream it from the rooftops until people get it. And it's just, I want to read this real quick. I want to read a couple little quotes that just this entire situation kind of makes me think about. And this is from Terence McKenna, psychedelic pioneer, Terence McKenna. Quote, reclaim your mind and get it out of the hands of the cultural engineers who want to turn you into a half-baked moron, consuming all this trash that's being manufactured out of the bones of a dying world, unquote.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what this stuff makes me think of. It's like, I forget the quote, but a dying society accumulates laws like a dying man accumulates remedies. Mm-hmm. And this just goes back to our previous conversation about having the unique perspective of a Gen Xer watching this new world come into being. And it is looking like a new dark age.
Oh, absolutely. It really is. For me, I mean, I just keep going back to 1984 because, I mean, first of all, I love that book. I think that Orwell is just so brilliant
Get it out of the park.
And I mean, it's not even that big of a book, Andrew. It's this little tiny book, but it's so powerful. I mean, the concepts that he's laying out there. I mean, in the beginning of the book, the 2-minute hate, where everybody gets together and they have this like 2 minutes to just like hate on Emmanuel Goldstein, Emmanuel Goldstein is essentially Putin, or whoever the monster is that we've set up. I mean, it was Trump for 4 years, and now it's Putin. He's the Emmanuel Goldstein, and we don't really even understand why we hate it. But we just know that we have to express this 2 minutes of hate, and we have to make sure that everybody around us understands that we are expressing this hate with them. So we're in their group, no matter what's going on in your mind, cognitively, or understanding the nuances and the context behind what's going on. No, it's just, these are the emotions that are given to you by the party. And they're targeted in the beginning of 1984 at Eurasia. And then at the end of the book, it's East Asia. And we've always been at war with East Asia. It doesn't even matter who the enemy is, that this enemy is given to you and told to you, this is your enemy. And you express the 2 minutes of hate, every morning, because that's what the party tells you that you have to do. And if you don't do it, then you'll be accused of being a conspirer. Well, you can be accused of being a traitor or conspiring with the enemy, like they're doing to Tulsi Gabbard, like they're doing to Tucker Carlson, like they're doing to anyone who expresses an opinion outside of the orthodoxy.
Like they did in Nazi Germany, like they did in Stalin's Russia, like they've done everywhere.
For sure. So, and then it's happening here in America. It's just really I mean, it shows that yes, we're in the new world. It's a new age, and they were calling for Tucker Carlson to be arrested on The View this week because of his commentary on Russia, because he is and Ukraine, because he is expressing a point of view that goes against the orthodoxy. Yeah, it's truly Orwellian, 100%. It's, I mean, it's actually mesmerizing when you're on the outside, like we are, looking at it happening. And I can totally see how 50 to 100 years from now, that this society looks very much like the society in Oceania in 1984.
And, you know, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, I got to be honest with you, with a lot of the stuff that's been going on in my life lately, and just thinking about the stuff and trying to create a plan for the future, my plans have changed quite a bit.
Oh, for sure.
And being confronted with that, even when you're aware of it and you saw it coming, is not easy.
No, it's
And
not.
and for the people out there that I continue to say on my show, if you're not aware of it, Matt from the Great Deception Podcast, who loves your show, by the way, he had this great analogy where he said it's this big tidal wave that's just gonna sweep across humanity, and if you're not aware of what's happening, you're gonna get swept up in it. And part of me wonders, when I think about that philosophical deep concept, when I try to break it down, it makes me think, like, is it better? Is ignorance being bliss better, and just getting hit in the face with it when it slaps you in the face more? Is that better compared to the slow, Chinese water torture of gaining wisdom and knowledge on the reality of things, and it just gets more and more validating to you over time? And then it's like, you almost have to find a way to separate yourself from it, and find the positive and the good and the silver lining in society. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to do. And I think that's where a lot of this mental illness is coming from. People are losing their marbles out there, and it's getting more and more apparent by the day. And I don't know what we do about it, man. I don't know what we do about it.
Well, you're talking about, and I came up with this concept, and you love the movie The Matrix, and this concept comes from the movie The Matrix, but it's called the Cipher Dilemma. Do you remember the guy Cipher from The Matrix?
He wants to get put back in. He wants to taste steak again and drink fine wine.
Yeah, and he says, "Take my memory away." He says that if I would have known the reality of that red and blue pill when Morpheus, when he first introduced it to me, we would have told him to shove that red pill up his ass. I would have told him, I don't want to have anything to do with that red pill. Fantastic. And then Cipher says, if I would have known the reality, I would have just taken the blue pill, and I would have just been, ignorant like everyone, and just gone with the flow. And then when he's making the deal with the Smiths, he says, I want you to put me back in the Matrix. I want you to erase my memory. I want to go back to being one of these ignorant saps that doesn't realize what that I will find more joy in that, and not the real world, even though that I know this world that I'm in right now is fake, and this steak that I'm eating is not real, and then it's all fake around me. I'd rather be in the fake than in the reality, because the reality. So some people are like Cipher, some people have that Cipher dilemma. I understand where you're coming from in asking that question. It's a profound question. Is it just better just to be one of the cogs? And well, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
That's what I was just gonna say, is that I can't do it, but I like entertaining ideas without necessarily accepting them. Aristotle, you know what I mean? Like, I like to take the role of the other, and kind of I'm trying to see more than what I already assume and know these days. And I think getting back to fundamentals on certain stuff is a great way to do that, and to review things that are probably more important than maybe you always remember, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in my future podcast, like my podcast that just came out today, Democracy in America, I talk about de Tocqueville's book and what he foresaw the future of democracy in America being and what he thought the nuts and bolts of it were. And I make the argument before I talk about it that kind of talking about when you, to your point about 1984, I talk about how since the founding of this nation, we went from majority rule, mob rule, the rule of the whole, democracy, to oligarchy. Somehow, take all the conspiracy theory conversations and all that crap out and just bring it down to the nuts and bolts of how have we in 245 years of this nation moved from connected, educated, participating in their society, citizens exercising their self-determination and their religious freedom, and today, a small group of wealthy planners. We've moved basically to an oligarchical form of government. We can still say it's a democracy. I don't see it. I don't see it anymore. And that book by de Tocqueville, where he brings up how he saw the future of democracy in America coming, I highly recommend you all go listen to that episode because
for sure.
It blew even my mind how accurate
I'm going to
prophecies.
And then where can I find Great Deception too? Where is he on Spotify? I want to take a listen.
He's on all of it, Spotify, Apple.
I'm gonna listen to that podcast.
I listen to Matt on and he gets into some deeper stuff, way more historical. Like you'll like his history aspects. And he covers a lot of different topics, but it does come from, how many great resets have there been? Who's really in control of this world? He explores.
It's absolutely an oligarchy. And I want to tell you how I believe that we went from a democracy to an oligarchy. And it goes back to this line in the Declaration of Independence at the end of that paragraph that I was just talking about, where it says, when a government becomes destructive to these ends of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, is the right of the people to abolish that government and establish a new government. And then it says at the end of that paragraph that those who govern at the consent of the governed. Right. And that word is very important, consent, because that is where Edward Bernays gets the word, where he talks about the manufacturing and the engineering of consent. That's how we have gone from a democracy to an oligarchy. The oligarchy still governs at the consent of the population, but the ignorant population has been manipulated to give their consent to things that don't benefit them. Their consent has been manufactured. It has been engineered, and they're giving their consent to things that are detrimental to them. And that's how we went from a democracy to an oligarchy.
I support the current thing.
Whatever it is.
I support the thing that's on my social media and on my mainstream media today, and it's going to change tomorrow. And I'm going to say a bunch of stuff on social media, and I'm going to come off like a big ignorant hypocrite. And I'm still going to think that I'm smart and I'm doing what everybody else is doing because everybody else is doing it. Just masses of brain dead lemming sheep walking around. Looking at each other.
The thing is, people just, they want to be so, they're so self-righteous, you know what I mean? So they want shocking. They want to basically, what is the word that they use when you are you're basically wearing your righteously on your sleeve. There's a word for it, and I'm drawing blank on it, but no, it's
holier than thou.
I can't think of the word for it, but it's a way to genuflect, your righteousness, and be and to project your morality to everyone else. And it's a false sense of morality, because if you were moral, you would have had something to say about Obama dropping all those bombs on civilians in Yemen. Exactly. If you had this higher sense of morality, you would have taken issue with 6 months ago Joe Biden dropping bombs on a family of 10 in Afghanistan as we leave that debacle in Afghanistan. If you really had this morality that you profess, you would have had something to say when Obama, killed all those people and brought slavery back to Libya. But it's not a true morality. It's only a false sense of morality that you have, that you are basically trying to project and wear on your sleeve so other people can see you and say, oh, this person is so moral now. He's standing up for the people of Ukraine. And quite frankly, to people like us, I mean, your hypocrisy, you're just dripping of hypocrisy. You know what I mean?
I actually talked about that, I think, in the audiogram I did for the Atlanticism episode. I said, we dropped 337,000 bombs over the course of the past 5 to 20 years in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Syria. And I'm like, and where's your outrage?
Where were you guys?
I'm like, where were you guys? Now this whole Ukraine thing's going on, and here's the reason. The reason why you have an opinion on it so emotionally is because it's being spoon-fed to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in your face. And when's the last time you heard about a bomb strike in Yemen? Yeah. When's the last time you heard about a bomb strike in Syria? Where's your outrage if you are looking at the situation from a moral perspective, a non-hypocritical perspective? It's just a joke to a thinking, rational person. And you just completely make a fool out of yourself and discredit anything that you have to say after you portray your real thoughts to the world. And that's really how you operate. And I'm trying to keep the faith, Sam, but I'm losing hope. No, I don't know, man. It's getting nutty.
It is getting nutty. And it's, I mean, I can see how anyone could be disheartened to see what is going on and how so many people are eating it up.
It's unbelievable. It's like it's propaganda that has been so trial and error, scientific methoded down to a meticulous science now. It's like they can even create states inside of you that they can literally probably somehow manipulate and project something deep down in your psyche to where it's like like once it's planted, you self-perpetuate it somehow. And that's where it's one thing to try to get someone to think something's cool or not cool, and that, to try to sway you for or against, which is probably propaganda 101. But these days, like you said, they can make you feel like you're a good person giving back to society just because you are parroting loudly to your community and to your family predetermined talking points, handcrafted for you to hear on your favorite media news outlet. And however your brain processes that without any perspective and without any real intellectual curiosity, like that is terrifying. Like mind control is a real thing. And to say it's conspiracy theory and to deny MK Ultra and everything that the CIA has done is just bananas that people can still refute it these days.
And what gets me is, and then when people do nothing more than ask questions and try to add context to the lies in the narrative, that they have just a really, really effective and it is effective. And it's simple. It's an effective and simple refute of people like us that are asking questions, and that people like Tucker Carlson or Tulsi Gabbard, anyone who goes against the orthodoxy, they have a very effective and just very simple refute, and you just say, "Oh, you're spreading Russian propaganda. You must be one of those
Label. Boom, put a
You
label on it.
you must be one of those Russians, you're spreading Russian propaganda. You must, be on Putin's side. And you're like, no, I'm not on Putin's side, or I'm just telling you the truth of what's going on. Well, that goes against, what I'm hearing from everywhere else. And Putin's killing civilians, and you're on the side of Putin just for trying to add context to, what these people are being told. Yeah, it's sad because we in this society, and the way that we have information at our fingertips and are able to access information, but even like that is not the case anymore. You see how they're censoring RT and other outlets that may not agree with the orthodoxy. So I don't even know that the information is as available as it could be, but if you cared, you could definitely go out and get the information. But
that's why I'm trying to read. That's why I'm trying to read more and get back into the books and, recall the basics that we've learned in, like, we both have sociology degrees, like Weber's Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. I really want to read that book again, because if you get, even for people that do the research and do the investigation, it's impossible not to be exposed to certain things on social media and from the mainstream media, and being able to process that in the right way, I think, is a skill we all develop over time. But it's one of those things where, if you can't even have a conversation anymore with people in public without it going down this talking point, emotional, fighting tirade of irrational thought, podcasting is the only thing we have left that we can use to make the attempt. And that's why I hate to be doom and gloom. I always say I'm trying to stay positive. I'm trying not to lose faith, but man, I really do feel like Carlin was right. Like, they got us by the balls, so much so that they can easily squash any uprising anywhere in this world at this point. With the drone, you brought up Brennan before. They got the drone warfare down to a science now. Like, it's just video games to the militaries of the world now. We're moving towards this fictitious digital fantasy world. It's crazy.
Yeah, but you're talking about all the technology and military equipment they have. I'm telling you, the propaganda is their strongest weapon.
For sure. I agree.
The propaganda is stronger than any of the bombs, any of the technology, anything. It is a propaganda war. It's an information war. And and in that regard, we have this, we don't have the same arsenal that they do, but we do have, a small part of that arsenal where we can go out and we can combat the propaganda and tell the truth and give the context. And even if it's with a small audience, one or two people reach, I ask myself, how many people, and I've been getting a lot of listens to my past 4 podcasts. The response has been really good, but I don't think that many Americans even knew that the Crimean people voted to be part of Russia, and that there was an actual referendum there, and that these people wanted to be part of Russia. I think that the majority of the people, because of the propaganda, thought that Russia came in with their military and forced these people to be part of Russia, and didn't even have any of that context. So that's what I try to do in my podcast, to say, no, look, these people wanted to be part of Russia. They had a referendum. They voted up to 90% to be part of Russia. Why?
No. CNN didn't tell me that, Sam. CNN did not tell me that.
Why?
So that can't be true.
You that
can't be true. I watched I caught Fox today, and nope, don't believe it.
Yeah, and so why are they not giving you any of that context? And they're manipulating you. And so what I'm saying is that
obvious.
Yeah, it really.
I remember when I talked with when I did the Monday Night Master Debaters. One of the guys on the panel was,
I haven't watched that yet. I'm probably gonna try to
from
do that.
his name is Casey, and he has an Instagram page, Golden Gate Star Fort Command. He gets into all these star forts and ancient Tartaria and the ancient world, kind of like Matt from the Great Deception podcast does. And he said on that panel, he was like, it's so in people's faces now. It's just like, he was just like, I cannot believe that people don't see it. And it is baffling to be able to see how effective the propaganda is. And I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I think there's some responsibility that those like us need to take.
For sure.
And I know you're going to keep going. You've been doing a great job, man. Like I like learning from you. I feel like we're all learning from each other. We're all growing.
Definitely.
And eventually, those listens are going to increase. Like people, it's only, what's that? I always forget who said this quote, but there's nothing more powerful in this world than an idea whose time has come. Yeah. And I think that slowly but surely, maybe not in our generation, but hopefully in the future generations, light bulbs are turning on, and people are going to realize that they got to get away from that mainstream media sooner or later. You would think.
I mean, I mean, I've done that podcast too. It's all corporate media. I mean, all the media is, and that was a major part of it too, controlling the media in these 5 companies that basically own all the media. They control the message. I look at Fox News now, and every single Fox News host is basically saying the exact same thing there's no variance in the messaging. The messaging is the same, no matter if you're listening to Fox, ABC, CNN, it is all the same in the corporate media world. But I want to, let's wrap this up today, Andrew, and I want to do another one of these, and maybe next week. And I want to talk about the money and what's going on with inflation, what's going on with the Federal Reserve, and how that is also a major part of this, because and that's a major issue to what's going on. It's not an accident that we have 40-year high inflation, and and Congress is still passing, $1 trillion packages that we're sending to Ukraine. Are they intentionally trying to destroy the dollar and cash and bring in a new form of currency? And I know you have some thoughts on that. And I would like us to maybe get together and talk about that aspect of this, because I think it's really important that people understand what's going on with the money and how the money is being used to also bring in this new world of control.
Yeah, and that's the topic that I think you're right. We should do a show on that, because that's going to be this wave that may or may not eventually come that you may or may not be prepared for. I think the financial aspect of it is going to be the one where once it gets to, worse than 1920 or 30s, whatever, Depression era America, once it gets to a point where it's, en route the Venezuela inflation, hyperinflation, and some other countries around the world that have experienced that recently. That's when one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, wow, it's, all of your luxuries and all of your ease, all of that tyranny of convenience that you needed, everything to be so convenient. Yeah. You know what? Well, that's still human being on this planet. You're going to have to learn.
And that's what, again, that I like about 1984, because he has all of these elements in there. He's got the war element, the constant war, and then he's got the 4 ministries: the ministry of truth, which is the propaganda, which we easily understand. The ministry of love was the jackboot police force that's going around Oceania, making sure that the ministry of love. So the ministry of truth was nothing but lies. The ministry of love is nothing but tyranny. The ministry of peace is nothing but war. And then the ministry of plenty, Nobody, people kind of like, they don't really understand the ministry of plenty, but the ministry of plenty is scarcity. It's austerity. And that's what's coming next, that it's not going to be plenty. It's going to be scarcity, and it's going to be austerity. That's what's coming next. And it's going to be managed by the oligarchy. And, and that has to do with the money. But let's do another show, and we'll talk about that in our next meeting, and we'll dive into the money, the bankers, how the bankers are managing this for their own benefit.
Okay. Sounds good, man. Yeah. Give our listeners your where to find your stuff.
So According to Sam Podcast is anywhere that you get your podcast: Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. It's all one word, According to Sam Podcast. You can even find it on my website, according2sam.com. And I do a once a week podcast. It's I try to get it out Tuesday evening, and I have a new podcast every Wednesday morning. If when you wake up, you'll find a new According to Sam podcast there.
Awesome, man. And my listeners know where to find me: politicsandpunkrockpodcast.com. Go buy a t-shirt or donate to the show. Send me an email, andrewforamerica1984@gmail.com. If you're a band and you want to be played on the show, I've been getting a lot of people interested in that aspect of my show. So continue sending me that stuff. I love that. I want to read more lyrics on the show too. So give me your bios and your lyrics. And Sam, always a pleasure. Let's definitely do currency and money, follow the money. What is inflation show together.
And we'll give it a week or so we'll have some time to think about and come up with how we want to approach that discussion. But I think that'll be a good discussion for us to talk about.
I completely agree, man. Great to see you. Thank you guys for listening. Good night. We'll see you next time.
All right, buddy.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it off. Hold on, I gotta stop this. How do I end recording?